The first indication came from a fishing boat. At 0423 hours on February 18, 2026, a Taiwanese fishing vessel operating 30 nautical miles off the coast of Hualien reported an unusual sighting. Warships, dozens of them, moving in formation toward Taiwan's eastern shore. The fisherman's radio message was picked up by Taiwan's Coast Guard Administration. Within minutes, it had been forwarded to the Ministry of National Defense in Taipei. By the time the sun rose over the Taiwan Strait, the world would learn that China had executed the most complex naval operation in its history. A complete encirclement of Taiwan. Welcome to Global Warfare TV. This is the story of how 73 Chinese warships surrounded a nation of 24 million people, and what that operation revealed about the future of warfare in the Pacific. To understand what happened on October 8th, you need to understand what Taiwan looks like from a military perspective. Taiwan is shaped roughly like a sweet potato, 394 kilometers long, 144 kilometers wide at its broadest point. The western coast faces mainland China across the Taiwan Strait. This is where everyone expects an invasion to come. The beaches are shallow, the terrain is relatively flat. The distance from Chinese launch points is shortest. Taiwan has spent 75 years fortifying this coast. Anti-ship missiles, coastal artillery, minefields, hardened bunkers. Everything designed to turn the Taiwan Strait into a kill zone for any amphibious force. But Taiwan's eastern coast is different. It faces the open Pacific. The terrain is mountainous. The beaches are narrow and rocky. An amphibious landing from the east would be extraordinarily difficult. For decades, Taiwan considered the eastern coast relatively safe. They were wrong. What's your assessment? Should Taiwan have fortified the eastern coast equally? Or was focusing on the strait the right strategic choice? Comment your answer below. China's Operation Pacific Embrace was designed to exploit Taiwan's geographic assumptions. The plan involved 3 simultaneous naval movements. The first movement was a feint. 28 vessels departed from ports along the Fujian coast, making obvious preparations for a strait crossing. They conducted live fire exercises. They broadcast on open frequencies. They made sure every satellite and radar station in the region was watching. Taiwan's military responded exactly as expected. They surged forces to the western coast. They activated reserve units. They positioned anti-ship missile batteries for maximum coverage of the strait. They looked west. Meanwhile, the second movement was underway. 23 vessels had departed from the Zhoushan Naval Base 72 hours earlier. Instead of heading toward Taiwan, they sailed northeast around the southern tip of Japan's Ryukyu Islands. The route added 1,400 nautical miles to their journey. It took them through international waters where their movements could not be legally challenged, and it brought them to Taiwan's undefended eastern coast. If you're following this analysis, hit that subscribe button. Global Warfare TV reveals the strategic moves that mainstream media misses. The third movement was the most audacious. 22 submarines, a mix of nuclear-powered Type 095s and diesel-electric Type 039s, had deployed quietly over the preceding 2 weeks. They had been operating in exercise patterns that intelligence analysts had flagged as routine training activity. They weren't training. They were pre-positioning. By the morning of October 8th, Chinese submarines had established a complete underwater perimeter around Taiwan. Any vessel attempting to approach or leave the island would have to pass through their coverage zone. The surface ships from the eastern approach arrived at 0500 hours. The feint force in the strait held position, maintaining the illusion of a western-focused operation. And Taiwan woke up surrounded. The scale of the operation was staggering. According to satellite imagery analyzed by American intelligence, China had deployed 28 surface vessels in the Taiwan Strait, 23 surface vessels off Taiwan's eastern coast, 22 submarines in a 360-degree perimeter, 3 aircraft carriers providing air coverage, approximately 400 combat aircraft operating from mainland bases, total forces involved, over 100,000 personnel. This was not a blockade. A blockade stops shipping. This was an encirclement. An encirclement prepares for invasion. Support Global Warfare TV by hitting that thumbs up if you're learning something from this analysis. Taiwan's response was immediate but limited. President Chen addressed the nation at 700 hours local time. Her message was defiant but careful. Taiwan will not be intimidated. We remain committed to our own defense and to peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences. We call on the international community to condemn this act of aggression. Behind the scenes, the situation was more desperate. According to sources within Taiwan's defense establishment, the sudden appearance of Chinese forces on the eastern coast had created a strategic crisis. Taiwan's mobile missile batteries were concentrated in the west. Repositioning them would take 12 to 24 hours. And any movement would be detected by Chinese reconnaissance, potentially triggering the very attack they were trying to deter. Taiwan's Air Force faced similar problems. Their fighter bases were positioned to defend against attacks from the strait. Defending the eastern approaches required reorienting the entire air defense network, and they had to do it while surrounded by hostile forces. The American response came within hours. The USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group, operating near the Philippines, was ordered to proceed toward Taiwan at maximum speed. Simultaneously, the Air Force began deploying F-22 Raptors to Kadena Air Base in Okinawa. B-52 bombers at Guam were loaded with long-range anti-ship missiles. But all of these forces were days away from being able to influence the situation. China had achieved something military planners call fait accompli. They had moved faster than anyone could respond. By the time American forces could arrive in strength, any intervention would require fighting through established Chinese positions. The cost of breaking the encirclement would be measured in carriers and aircraft. Thousands of American lives. What would you do if you were the American president? Accept the encirclement or fight through at catastrophic cost? Tell me in the comments. The encirclement held for 96 hours. During that time, no vessel entered or left Taiwanese ports. Commercial flights were suspended. The island's 24 million residents watched and waited. Global stock markets collapsed. Semiconductor supplies froze. Tech companies began implementing crisis protocols. But China did not invade. According to intelligence assessments compiled after the crisis, the encirclement was not the prelude to invasion. It was the message itself. China was demonstrating capability. They were showing Taiwan and the world that they could cut the island off from outside support whenever they chose. They were proving that American military power could not arrive fast enough to prevent encirclement. And they were testing how the international community would respond. The response was revealing. Japan condemned the operation and offered to host additional American forces. Australia and the Philippines issued strong statements of support for Taiwan. But other nations were more cautious. Several European countries called for restraint by all parties, language that implied equivalence between Chinese aggression and Taiwanese resistance. ASEAN nations were notably silent. Their economies depended on Chinese trade. They could not afford to alienate Beijing. The coalition that America would need to fight a war over Taiwan was showing cracks. On October 11th, the crisis began to de-escalate. China announced that its routine military exercises had concluded successfully. The encircling forces began withdrawing, slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone understood that they were leaving by choice, not by force. Within 72 hours, the last Chinese warship had pulled back beyond Taiwan's ADIZ. The immediate crisis was over, but the strategic implications were just beginning. The October encirclement taught several lessons that military planners on all sides are still processing. First, China can achieve operational surprise even against the most sophisticated intelligence apparatus in the world. The feint and flank strategy had worked perfectly. American satellites had tracked every ship, but they had tracked them doing what appeared to be normal exercise activity. The pattern recognition algorithms that intelligence agencies rely on had been systematically deceived. Second, Taiwan's geographic defenses have a critical vulnerability. The focus on the Taiwan Strait left the eastern coast exposed. China had found the gap and exploited it. Taiwan immediately began repositioning forces and constructing new coastal defenses. but the vulnerability had been demonstrated to the world. Third, the Carl Vinson was the closest carrier to Taiwan. Even at flank speed, it couldn't arrive for 48 hours. Aircraft deployments took 24 to 36 hours to reach operational readiness. In 48 hours, China had demonstrated they could accomplish whatever they wanted. Fourth, the international coalition is fragile. Many nations that America counted on for diplomatic support were reluctant to choose sides. Economic dependence on China complicated political calculations. A shooting war over Taiwan would not have unanimous Western backing. The aftermath of the October encirclement reshaped Pacific strategy. The United States accelerated plans to pre-position forces in the region. Agreements were reached with the Philippines to expand military access. Guam's defenses were hardened. Marine units began rotating through Taiwan for training exercises, a new development that Beijing protested loudly. Taiwan mandatory military service was extended from 4 months to 1 year. Defense spending increased by 40%. New missile batteries were deployed to cover the eastern coast, and the civilian population began preparing for the possibility of siege. Water storage, food stockpiling, decentralized communication networks. Taiwan was preparing to survive isolation. China drew its own lessons. According to intelligence analysis, PLA commanders considered the operation a complete success. They had demonstrated capability without firing a shot. They had exposed vulnerabilities in Taiwan's defenses. They had tested international resolve and found it wanting. The next operation, whenever it comes, will build on these lessons. The encirclement also revealed something about China's strategic patience. They did not invade when they had the chance. They did not push for immediate unification. Instead, they demonstrated power and withdrew. This suggests a strategy of gradual pressure rather than sudden strike. Each crisis pushes Taiwan closer to accommodation. Each demonstration of capability erodes confidence in American protection. Eventually, China may calculate Taiwan will simply accept inevitable unification. Or eventually, America will tire of the commitment. Time, in Beijing's view, is on their side. The 73 warships that surrounded Taiwan in October 2024 have returned to port. The submarines have dispersed. The aircraft have returned to base. But the memory remains. Taiwan knows it can be encircled. The world knows it can be cut off. And everyone knows that next time, the warships might not withdraw. The Taiwan Strait has been called the most dangerous place on Earth. After October 8th, that description extends to every side of the island. Taiwan is no longer protected by geography, only by the uncertain promise of American intervention. And that promise is looking more uncertain every day. The question isn't whether China will try again. The question is what they'll do next time. Stay vigilant, stay informed. I'll see you in the next one.